Alright, I am back with another video, and today we're doing another What If build, and today we're doing one for Wyll. Although with my other What If builds have kind of had a slightly more positive outlook to them, maybe aside from the Astarion build, this one is the complete opposite. What if Wyll basically was still really resentful of his father, of his situation, of how he was cast away from Baldur's Gate and basically made out to be this villain in the eyes of the people, especially his father, and because of that he decides to gain as much power as he can. Perhaps he's still of the conviction that he wants to be a hero of the people, but that kind of ideology has been twisted and morphed into something a bit more sinister, where he plans to, in order to, in his mind, make Faerun a safer place, and Baldur's Gate, you know, by extension, he plans to completely overthrow his father, following Mizora's orders in order to gain as much infernal power as possible and become the Scourge of Avernus. This is a idea that was given to me by a commenter on YouTube named Wolfric. They basically gave me this idea and even came up with the title, The Scourge of Avernus, so I really appreciate them submitting this idea. So I guess you could call it a build request as well, but this is definitely more of a what if build. I really like this idea. I think it's an interesting take on Wyll to give him a good justification for going down this route, and hell, I think it's a really interesting thing to explore either as an origin or with him in the party. Now, of course, as you can see by the equipment that I have, this does mean we're going to be doing some things that I know a few people aren't exactly going to like, but hey, you're role-playing an evil run, I think it makes sense to do just that. So, let's get into the build. Now, of course, I mean, you guys probably saw this coming a mile away, but if we're talking about a character who basically, you know, turns back on their beliefs in order to achieve power, then what's better than an Oathbreaker Paladin? I think, I just bumped my mic, I think the Paladin here kind of makes a lot of sense for Wyll. I've made Wyll a Warlock, I've made Wyll a Bard, and of course we're going to be getting Warlock levels in this build. But I feel like Paladin obviously is a great combo with Warlock anyway, and it's going to give us a ton of stuff that feels on theme for the build. So I think less that Wyll was actually a Paladin, like, beforehand. Like, I don't think he took up, like, an actual oath, but I feel like he has such resentment, and the actual act of basically turning his back on everything in order to achieve power basically made him take up the oath of oath-breaking? Does that make sense? Basically, we are going to be kicking things off as a Paladin, but we are going to be breaking our oath pretty much immediately, and you can do that extremely easily. You can do it pretty much within the first 5 minutes of getting off the Nautiloid. Basically, the earliest you could do it would be if you were to attack the two tieflings that have Lae'zel in a cage. You don't even have to kill them, just one attack, escape from combat, and you immediately break your oath. So that's how you could do it right away. However, I am going to be just quickly showing you kind of the basic stats, and then we'll swap to Oathbreaker after that. So let's get into it. As a Paladin, we're going to be getting our Lay on Hands and Divine Sense features, as well as our Channel Oath, all that standard stuff. Wyll is a human, meaning that he is going to get basic racial speed. He's going to get the Civil Militia feature, meaning that he can use spears, planks, and halberds and glaives, and gains armor proficiency with light armor and shields, regardless of the class you pick, which is nice, could be useful. And also we have human versatility, selecting an additional skill to be proficient in. And our carrying capacity is increased by 1/4, meaning that we can carry a lot of things. As I said, we're already starting with Paladin. Your subclass really doesn't matter, because obviously we're going to be breaking it immediately. Oath of Vengeance would be the closest thing thematically if you don't want to be an Oathbreaker, so there you go. Our background is Folk Hero, that is just what Wyll has, and we cannot change it, giving us animal handling and survival. And again, I do think this is an interesting twist on the take that, like, he sees himself as a hero, but in the way he's going to be a hero, he's gonna do some pretty evil shit. Definitely an anti-hero, if not a straight-up villain, playing the hero in this case. Honestly, a character like this would make a great antagonist for a campaign. Just saying. God, could you imagine playing, like, a Baldur's Gate, like, what-if D&D campaign? Where, like, maybe it's... and, like, you have, like, a bunch of these alternative builds for the origin characters, and they appear as NPCs in the campaign. Like, this version of Wyll could be, like, an antagonist. Oh, imagine... Now, actually, hang on, this is a total tangent, but imagine playing a D&D campaign where you're, like, kind of stuck in, like, a multiversal kind of travel, and, like, every day you jump into an alternate universe version of the place that you're in, and maybe you're stuck in Baldur's Gate after the events of, well, Baldur's Gate 3, and your party is basically dimension hopping, seeing different alternative versions of the same place, and they have to, like, fix the problems in each as they go. And you could get, like, Evil Wyll, Hero Karlach trying to stop something, the return of an Orpheus Monk Lae'zel, Ranger Wyll returns from Avernus in a different one, or something like that, or Professor Gale, like, and, like, you're stuck, and you're, like, maybe you're at Waterdeep or something, like, that could be really cool. But anyway, total tangent, but something to think about. Anyways, ability scores. We are going to be playing as a Warlock Paladin here with a finesse weapon because, of course, we're going to be using the gear that we get from Mizora in this build. So, Dexterity at 16 for a decent chunk of armor class, Constitution at 14. Feel free to swap Dexterity and Constitution if you like, depending on whether you want more AC or more HP, but we'll have an opportunity to bump up either later. Intelligence at Wisdom is at 10. This is just to round out our ability scores nicely, but you can change that about as you see fit. And Charisma at 16 because it is going to be our main spellcasting and attacking stat. Although you don't actually have to take Pact of the Blade with this build, and you'll see why in a minute. As for our skill proficiencies, we get Animal Handling and Survival from our Folk Hero background. We're also going to be able to get Deception, Intimidation, and Persuasion between our race and class proficiencies. I decided to get all of the kind of the dialogue skills for Wyll, because I feel like that makes sense in this case, for a character who is basically kind of like on the evil path, but also trying to be a hero. It feels like having the conversation skills does make sense, being able to persuade, intimidate, and deceive others, but feel free to chuck these around into different skills if you think that makes sense for you. Hello, Mizora. Right, so now I'm going to have to go commit a crime real quick in order to break my oath, so be right back. And as you can see, we are now an Oathbreaker. At level 1 Oathbreaker, we get the ability Spiteful Suffering, allowing us to basically mark a target using our channel Oath Charge. They take 1d4 necrotic damage every turn, and attack rolls against them have advantage. Pretty nice overall. Right, now the main reason we started as Paladin was to get all of the usual Paladin goodies, like heavy armor proficiency and all that. So you have full armor proficiency to use if you don't feel like you want to use all of the Mizora gear. Perhaps you do want Karlach to live. So you do have all those options there, and it also gives us all the martial weapon proficiencies that we want, yada yada yada. I think I am going to go to level 2 of Paladin here in order to grab Divine Smite before we start getting into the Warlock levels, just because that makes sense to me. But if you feel like you want to do slightly different level progression with this build, it's not going to matter. But level 2 of Paladin is, as I said, going to give us Divine Smite, Spellcasting, and a Fighting Style, which actually allows us to grab Dueling. Since we are going to be using a Rapier with this build, this is just going to give us an additional 2 damage with any attacks that we make with it, which is great. We also do get to prepare spells at this point, and of course, I want to take the Smite spells, especially Searing Smite. With Paladin, we're actually going to be able to kind of get, like, the kind of Tiefling proficiencies here, which I think is going to be really nice for us overall. So when I say Tiefling proficiencies, I mean, like, you know how, like, some of, like, Zariel Tieflings get, like, the Smite spells as a racial feature. If we're kind of playing, like this, like, fiendish version of Wyll, it kind of makes sense to pick them up. Also, I will actually point out that it's kind of ironic that this is on my Act 3 playthrough where I have all the characters already unlocked. As you can see, Wyll does have his horns here, but if you were to play this evil version of Wyll, Wyll would actually never get these horns. He would remain looking like a human. So, of course, it brings up the kind of thing of, like, well, actually, the more human he looks, the more of a monster he truly is. And I think that's fun. I like what Larian did there. Anyways, total tangent aside, let's keep going. Compelled Duel makes sense for a kind of, like, finesse kind of duelist type. Compelled Duel just, I think, works for Wyll, as well as Heroism, again, in a very twisted sense of the word. Right, now let's start jumping over to those Warlock levels. Again, you could actually do all the Paladin levels first if you want to perhaps get extra attack a bit earlier, but I do kind of want to focus on getting the Warlock stuff because that is more of Wyll's thing, especially in a build themed like this. So we're going to jump over to Warlock now, and you could even start with Warlock technically if you want to, but I do feel like at least the 1 level Paladin to start does make sense. So, with Warlock, we're obviously going to get a bunch of things, namely Eldritch Blast, and yes, we are going to fire Eldritch Blast into this build, but playing a Warlock, we might as well use its strengths, as well as Friends, because again, it's one of my favourite cantrips in the game. Subclass, of course, we're going with the Fiend. That's just Mizora's whole deal. She is a Fiend, so it would make no sense to go for the other two. This is going to get us Dark One's Blessing. Whenever we reduce a hostile creature to 0 hit points, we gain 4 temporary hit points, or hit points equal to our Charisma modifier. We're also going to get access to a couple of spells. Now, believe it or not, we will actually get Hellish Rebuke, from Paladin later on. Oathbreaker does get some of these spells, so we are going to be getting that later so we can avoid picking that. I would say Arms of Hadar and Armour of Agathis are pretty good. Arms of Hadar is okay, but Armour of Agathis is not as good on this build, simply because of the fact that we're only going to get up to level 3 spell slots at this point, and those will be our Warlock spell slots. So Armour of Agathis isn't going to be the strongest thing in Act, for example, in the later acts, so maybe something like Hex for like kind of a low-level concentration option would make more sense. Next up, at level 4, we are going to be a Warlock 2, meaning that we are going to get our extra Warlock spell slots, as well as access to Invocations. As for a spell that you can pick up, I mean, I know I just kind of shit-talked it, but let's just grab Armour of Agathis anyway, because you never know, it could be a bit more useful in the early game. And now, Invocations. We're going to want Agonizing Blast to bump up the damage of our Eldritch Blast, equal to our Charisma modifier, and we're also going to want, and I think this might be a first for the channel, maybe the Hellfire Pyromancer took this, I can't remember, Armour of Shadows. Armour of Shadows is going to give us the ability to cast Mage Armour basically for free whenever we want, and since we are wearing clothing with this build, we are going to want to pick this up. If you're not wearing clothing with this build, if you decide not to grab the Infernal Robe, you can pick literally anything else: Repelling Blast, Fiendish Vigor, Devil's Sight, which we'll grab later anyway, Beguiling Influence, Beast Speech, but for now I want Armour of Shadows so we can wear clothing. Next up, at Warlock level 3, we do get to choose our Pact boon as well as some level 2 spells. For a level 2 spell, we're just going to pick up Scorching Ray because it is the most on theme for us at the moment. We can also I can also see us replacing a spell as well. I would say replace Armour of Agathis and grab Dark. And actually, you don't need to grab Darkness because Oathbreaker Paladin will get Darkness. So I could actually see you picking up Hold Person instead. Now, for your Pact boon, this is where things get a bit tricky. If you've been on the channel long enough, you'll know that if you have Pact of the Blade, its extra attack will stack with regular extra attack, meaning you can make up to 3 attacks per turn with your Pact weapon. That's great, unless you're playing on Honor mode. And we're also going to be using a weapon that actually uses our spellcasting modifier, Charisma, instead of our Strength or Dexterity anyway. So if you're playing on Honor mode, and heck, even on the other difficulties in a sense, there's not actually that much of a reason to take Pact of the Blade. If you want to get those stacking extra attacks and you want to be able to use other weapons with your Charisma, then yes, Pact of the Blade is fine if you're not playing on Honor mode. But I honestly do think if you're playing on Honor mode, and for the purposes of this build, I would say go Pact of the Tome. I'll get to you one day, Pact of the Chain. In fact, actually, I had this idea for a video. Let me know if you guys want to see this. One thing I would change about every class in Baldur's Gate 3, because I've got some notes, and Pact of the Chain is definitely one of them, so let me know if you want to see that. In fact, actually, you know what? I might record that video after this. You know what? I am going to do that. Forget I said that. That video will actually be out maybe today, which is Sunday, so before this video. Yes, so you will have seen that video already. Okay. Anyways, Pact of the Tome is going to give you 3 cantrips. Guidance, which is always nice. Vicious Mockery, which kind of gets that bardic flavour that I always like to go with Wyll, so you have that option as well. And Thorn Whip, just a nice little, fun little collection of cantrips here that have some decent utility. At Warlock level 4, we are going to get an extra cantrip, and since this build is going to have a bit of a necrotic vibe to it, let's grab Bone Chill. As well as for our spells, we do get to pick up another level 2 spell of our choosing, and it's entirely up to you what you want to grab here. I kind of like Cloud of Daggers for this build thematically, so feel free to pick that up if you want. And we also do get access to a feat at this point, and I'm going to bump up our Charisma. Now at Warlock level 5, we are going to get an extra Eldritch Invocation and our Deepened Pact feature. Because we are a Pact of the Tome Warlock, we get Animate Dead, Haste, and Cool Lightning, which feels very, very nice. Haste is a lovely spell to have. We can only cast each of them once per long rest, but honestly, that's more than enough. We do also gain access to a level 3 spell at this point, and you know I'm picking Fireball, because come on, it's Fireball. We also do get access to another Eldritch Invocation at this level, and I'm going to be grabbing Devil's Sight to allow us to do the Darkness Devil's Sight combo. We're going to be getting it all with this Warlock, all of the usual tricks and trades. That's not how that phrase goes. Now, I don't see a reason to go to level 6 of Warlock here. I think going to level 7 of Paladin is going to be much more valuable, so we're hopping back over there. Level 3 of Paladin is going to give us access to more Channel Oath options, allowing us to control undead and frighten our enemies. We also gain access to Hellish Rebuke and Inflict Wounds here as well, which is very, very nice. At level 4, we're going to get an extra Lay on Hands charge and access to some more spells. My spell list got a little bit messed up here, but honestly, it's mostly what I would make it. I think Shield of Faith, though, is a nice one to have on this build. The rest of the spells we have here are quite nice as well. We also do get to grab another ability score improvement, and at this point, you do have a choice. This is the last ability score improvement we're going to get in the build, so you kind of have a choice of what you want to do. There's a few things that I would suggest would work. More Dexterity would mean more Armour class. Constitution would be more HP. Charisma, we're already going to get 20 Charisma thanks to the Birthright hat. Spoilers, I guess, but you probably saw that coming. So you don't actually need to bump up your Charisma any higher here, but that's up to you if you do want to. I could also see Defensive Duelist working nicely since we are using a Rapier. This would allow us to use our reaction to add our proficiency bonus to our armor class. Although this build is a little bit reaction heavy between Hellish Rebuke and opportunity attacks, so you might not always find a use case for this, but this would be probably the highest amount of armor class you could get without bumping up the basic stats. In my testing, I bumped up Constitution. I found, since we're going to be in melee range quite a lot, that extra HP is actually quite nice to have. The enemies in Act 3 do hit quite hard, and if you're playing this build in Honor mode, then yeah, you're definitely going to want that extra HP. In fact, I'm not sure exactly how Honor mode ready this build is, but again, I only do solo testing. As part of a group, this build would probably be a lot stronger. It's still a strong build. It's just not uber stupid powerful, at least most of the time. Anyways, at level 5 of Paladin, we are going to be getting extra attack. Again, if you chose Pact of the Blade, you would have already had extra attack up until this point. In fact, maybe you want to respec to Tome later, once you kind of get to this point. That's entirely up to you. But if you do keep Pact of the Blade, your extra attacks will stack if you're not playing on Honor mode here, so this is where the build really starts to kick into overdrive power-wise. You're also going to get access to level 2 spells, including Crown of Madness and Darkness, like I said, so now we have Darkness and Devil's Sight online. We also do gain access to level 2 spells, as I said, and we're going to be picking up Branding Smite, as that is the other legacy of Avernus Smite. At Paladin level 6, we are going to get Aura of Protection. Despite everything that Wyll's gone through up to this point to make him this twisted version of himself, he still has a desire to protect others deep down, and this aura will allow him to do that, adding your Charisma modifier to yourself and your allies' saving throws while they are within range. You also do get to prepare another spell at this level, and honestly, just choose whatever you like. And finally, at Paladin level 7, we're going to get our next aura, Aura of Hatred. Again, his hatred for what happened to him, the betrayal of his father, it boils and boils and bubbles inside until him and any nearby fiends and undead, and fiends can be a Cambion, which we will get the ability to summon. It all works together. They gain an additional bit of damage equal to our Charisma modifier. It says 4 here, but because we'll have 20 by the time this build is done, that's actually going to be a 5, which is lovely. And we also do get to prepare another spell. Pick whatever you like. And that is the build. Overall, what you're getting out of this is a ton of power and versatility. Melee, powerful melee attacks with Divine Smite, powerful ranged attacks with Eldritch Blast, a ton of different spells for many different situations, concentration and not, things like Haste, Fireball, Cloud of Daggers, Vicious Mockery, the Elemental Smites, your auras to give you better saving throws, more power on your attacks, and also things like the Darkness Devil's Sight combo to really, really let loose. You even have healing thanks to Lay on Hands, Spiteful Suffering for extra damage and advantage, Hex. There's a lot to work with this build. You'll find that this build is going to have a lot of versatility, and the equipment helps with that even more, so let's get into it. With the equipment, I mean, like I said, we are going to be using the equipment gained from Wyll's questline for following Mizora's orders. I mean, that just makes sense to me. Why wouldn't we do that? So let's get actually into those two pieces of equipment first. The first one you'll get is the Infernal Robe. This is a really nice piece of clothing. It gives you a +1 to your armor class, the ability to use Fire Shield, the fire variant, allowing you to become resistant to cold damage and retaliate with fire damage whenever someone attacks you. It lasts for 10 turns and is just very, very on theme. And you're also going to be getting resistance to fire damage and a +1 to your armor class. I mean, overall, it's really nice. Combine that with Mage Armor, if I cast that very quickly. You're coming out of this with a total of 18 AC, which is a bit on the lower side, but we do have ways of patching that up, such as Shield of Faith or Haste, or you can use a shield on this build. I didn't go for it for aesthetic reasons, but any shield will work on this build, as Wyll is a human, getting the ability to use shields, as well as the fact that we took a Paladin at the start anyway, so you can use a shield with this build to bump yourself up. There's plenty of decent options there, pick your favourite. Anyways, the other piece of equipment is obviously the Infernal Rapier. You gain a +1 bonus to spell save DC, making our spell casting a bit more effective, and instead of your dexterity modifier, the affected entity adds its spell casting ability modifier to the attack and damage rolls. It only says attack rolls on the piece of equipment, but it is the damage rolls as well, so you are going to be able to use this weapon quite effectively, even without Pact of the Blade. But if you wanted to go Pact of the Blade, like I said, it wouldn't exactly be missed. It would give you options for other weapons as well. This is a +2 weapon overall, and it's also going to give you the ability to use the Planar Allied Cambion spell, allowing you once per long rest to summon a Fiendish Cambion to fight alongside you. It can cast Fiendish Charm, Draining Kiss, and Rays of Fire. Hey, remember Rays of Fire from the trivia night? If you weren't there for that stream, go back and watch it, because oh, I don't think I've pissed off so many people at once. Ever in my life. Anyways, so, yes, the Infernal Rapier is basically going to be our weapon of choice. It fits perfectly from the build, and both the Infernal Robe and the Infernal Rapier are gained through Mizora by following her orders. The Infernal Robe especially is going to be very tough for some people to get, but if you're role-playing this build, then you gotta do it right. Let's get into the rest of the equipment. So, for an Act 1 option as a weapon before you get the Infernal Rapier, because you do get this right at the end of Act 2, the Rupturing Blade is great. It is basically a basic +1 rapier that you can get really, really early, and it comes with Searing Blood, a unique attack, allowing you to deal extra piercing and fire damage, while you take a bit of damage yourself, but I think it works quite nicely and thematically for this build. Again, that kind of fire hellish theming. As for our headpiece, we have obviously the Birthright Hat, as I said, giving us a +2 to Charisma, allowing us to put an ability score improvement into our other stats to make us a bit more well-rounded, or a feat if you so choose. But before you get that, you can pick up the Hat of Fire Acuity, allowing us to, whenever we deal fire damage, which will be quite a lot of the time, we gain Arcane Acuity, meaning that we gain a +1 bonus to our attack rolls and spell difficulty class for each remaining turn, just making it so all of our spells are a bit more effective. But the Birthright Hat is definitely what you want to be going for. Next up, the Cindermoth Cloak. Basically, any creature that damages the wearer within 2 meters receives burning, so not only are they going to be taking damage from our fire shield, they're also going to be setting themselves on fire as well, which is great. We've already gone over the Infernal Robe, and now we have the obvious choice, the Hell Dust Gloves. They're literally gloves from Avernus that give us extra fire damage. I know I use these way too much, but come on, they were too perfect for this build for me to just ignore. They give us a +1 bonus to our spell attack rolls and spell save DC, which is great for our spell casting. All of our weapon attacks deal an additional 1d6 fire damage, as well as we get the Rays of Fire cantrip, essentially giving us a Fire Eldritch Blast, which does a fuck ton of damage, which is great. And look, it's a cantrip! Anyways, next up, the Bone Spike Boots. You have a +1 bonus to armor class and saving throws as long as you are not wearing armor or holding a shield. Now, as I said, you can use a shield with this build if you so desire, in which case you might want to swap these boots out. In fact, you can actually use the earlier game option, which would be the Evasive Shoes, which would give you a +1 bonus to your armor class flat out, and then slap a shield on there to get a total of 20 or even 21 AC if you have a +3 shield. That could be that's probably the most optimal way to do this, but again, for aesthetic reasons, I decided not to do that. Also, you can use the flawed Helldust Gloves until you get the Helldust Gloves, which basically just turns that d6 of fire damage down to a d4. And it doesn't give us Ray of Fire, but it's pretty good as you can get it much earlier. Next up, we have the Spellcrux Amulet. This is essentially going to give us a third level spell slot once per long rest, so basically it will allow us to restore one of our Warlock spell slots once per long rest as a bonus action in the middle of combat, giving us 3 level 3 Divine Smites, 3 level 3 spells. Entirely up to you kind of how you want to play that, but just having that extra little bit of resource is great. There is another resource in the game that allows you to regain a Warlock spell slot. It is a staff, I believe, and I decided not to go for that on this build, but that is an option if you wanted to look into it. And of course, we're playing a Warlock Paladin, so let's use my two favourite rings for Warlocks and Paladins. Ring of Arcane Synergy. Whenever we deal damage with our Eldritch Blast, or even Raise of Fire actually, we gain Arcane Synergy for 2 turns, meaning that we add our spellcasting modifier to the attack and damage of our attacks. Again, just stacking with everything else we're doing. Everything is using our charisma. This is going to make our melee attacks extremely powerful after using Eldritch Blast, which we want to be doing anyway. And next up, the Killer's Sweetheart. Whenever we kill a creature, your next attack roll will be a critical hit. Once spent, this effect refreshes after a long rest. Basically, when you kill an enemy, you gain a reaction that you can bank to use to basically get a free critical hit whenever you like. There's no limit to it. And yeah, that is the build. This whole armor set has been coloured in the black and furnace red dye, in case you're curious. But yeah, that is the build. I mean, at the end of the day, it's a padlock. And padlocks are strong. You get a ton of versatility thanks to things like Pact of the Tome. Like I said, you have a ton of different options for dealing damage, and that damage will be huge. Both Divine Smite and Eldritch Blast will kind of be your bread and butter combo, and you're able to support yourself with things like Fire Shield, the Cambion, Spiteful Suffering, Haste, all of that good stuff. You'll have plenty of options, and you'll be able to just pile on the power and defensive utility thanks to the 2 auras that you get, and you have a lot of different damage types on this build. Necrotic, Fire, Psychic, you have even lightning to an extent, and radiant too. You have so many different options to be able to overcome different resistances with varied types of damage, but not many things in the game resist radiant anyway, or force, which is Eldritch Blast, so you're probably not going to have to worry about that too much anyway, but obviously those other options are there if you so desire. But yeah, I mean, that is the build. As you can see, this the combat footage, this encounter was close. Don't get me wrong, we finished it off with 9 HP, but it was a very quick encounter. This build is definitely a bit of a glass cannon. Again, if you use a shield, that will be less so the case, but basically the way you're going to be playing this build is to just deal as much damage as you can, perhaps while other allies kind of take the brunt of the kind of damage that would be dealt to you. Maybe partner this up with a tank or something to really kind of get the most out of it, but that's entirely up to you. Play that as you see fit. But honestly, I'm quite happy with this build. I think the concept is really interesting of just this, you know, bitter, spiteful Wyll who decides to rule over, like, basically overthrow Baldur's Gate and then rule it kind of with an iron fist in order to protect it. Kind of becoming similar to Gortash in a way, but perhaps a bit less malicious at heart, whereas Gortash is just, well, it's just kind of straight up fucking evil. Whereas Wyll is just very, very misguided. Mizora has spent years manipulating him in subtle ways to the point where he's basically completely under her control, and by extension, Zariel as well, and he doesn't even really realize it. I think it's a really interesting dynamic to have, and again, you can just see, like, the regal human Wyll sitting atop his father's throne, as everyone kind of bows before him, like, as Mizora kind of sits, like, off to the side in, like, a very haughty position. Like, you know how you can literally picture it in your head exactly how that kind of ending would go. And again, I don't know why this is such a concept that I'm stuck on, but if you wanted to run, like, this version of Wyll as, like, an antagonist in, like, a one-shot for like a D&D session set in Baldur's Gate, I think that could be extremely, extremely fun. So feel free to run with that idea. Maybe that's something I'll do on the channel in the future. Maybe I'll run that as a one-shot for a few people, and we'll see how that goes. But don't hold me to it, because it's very, very hard to get a D&D group together, as I'm currently finding out. But anyways, I really, really hope you guys enjoyed this video. I had a ton of fun making it. I'm going to go see if I can record that one thing I would change about every class video, because I think that could actually be just a fun little bonus thing to do. So look forward to seeing that yesterday. You've already seen it. I don't know anymore. Thank you all so much for watching, and I will see you all next time.